research scholars, students, and participants. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you to this international seminar on Voices from the Margins, Memory, Identity, and Politics of Representation in Contemporary Culture. This academic gathering has been organized by the Department of English in collaboration with IQS Uluberia College and the Department of English, Gangadharpur Mahavidya Mandir. We are honored to host you today at the Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar Auditorium for a day of meaningful intellectual engagement and discussion. The very title of this seminar draws attention to the voices that often remain unheard. It encourages us to reflect on how memory, identity, representation shape contemporary culture and social realities. Through literature and culture, marginal voices find space for resistance and transformation. We are really honored to have our distinguished speakers today at present. Retired Professor Dr. Devi Chatterjee, today's keynote speaker, and Dr. Arijita Shatra, our plenary speaker. First of all, I invite all of them, our principal ma'am and IQAC coordinator Dr. Shiv Shankar Das, and GB member Mr. Rakesh Ghosh, governing body member and HOD Political Science, Uluberia College, and Dr. Lipika Mondol, principal, Uluberia College. So I invite all of them on the dais first. So please, ma'am, and the resource persons present in this seminar, please come on the dais. I request Dr. Shiv Shankar Das, IQAC coordinator, Uluberia College, on the dais, as well as Mr. Rakesh Ghosh, governing body member and HOD Political Science, Uluberia College. To begin this auspicious occasion on a soulful note, it's our immense pleasure that is we have today respected principal, ex-principal of Mahatma Vasishwar College, Latur, Maharashtra. He is present now, and I invite also him on the dais. To begin this auspicious occasion on a soulful note, Rabindra Sangit Amar Mukti Aloy Aloy will be presented by Dipra Bishas, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science. I invite ma'am to come on the dais.
আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় আমার মুক্তি ধুলায় ধুলায় ঘাসে ঘাসে এই আকাশে আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয় দেহ মনে সুদূর পারে মেঘে ভাসে এই আকাশে আমার লক্ষ্মী আলোরে আলো।
Thank you. Now we proceed to the ceremonial lighting of the lamp, symbolizing triumph of knowledge over darkness. I request our respected principal and honored guests, resource persons, Honorable GB member and ex-president IPC coordinator to kindly come forward for the lamp lighting ceremony. So now the felicitation ceremony. We now move to the felicitation as a mark of our respect and gratitude. At first, I'd like to request our respected principal ma'am, Dr. Lipika Mandal, to kindly felicitate retired Professor Dr. Devi Chatterjee, today's keynote speaker. Now, our respected principal ma'am is felicitating Professor Dr. Chatterjee with an Utturyo flower bouquet, a potted green plant, and a token of appreciation. Professor Chatterjee is retired professor, Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, and editor-in-chief of the reputed journal named Contemporary Voices of Delhi, published by Sage. So felicitating Professor Chatterjee with a token of appreciation. Next, I request Dr. Shiv Shankar Das, IPSC coordinator, to felicitate Dr. Orijita Shatra. She is the plenary speaker of today's international seminar. Coordinator, IPSC coordinator is felicitating with Utturyo potted green plant and a token of appreciation and a flower bouquet. She is research fellow, Department of English and African Center of Evidence, University of Johannesburg. Orijita Shatra. She is a research fellow, Department of English and African Center of Evidence, University of Johannesburg. Now I request Mr. Rakesh Ghosh, governing body member, assistant professor and HOD, Department of Political Science, to felicitate our beloved principal ma'am, Dr. Lipika Mondul. So, with Utturyo, with flower book, as well as Next, I request Dr. Bashab Datta Ghosh, Faculty Assistant Professor, Department of English, to felicitate Mr. Rakesh Ghosh, GB Member, Assistant Professor and Head, Department of Political Science, Uluberia College. I would like to request Mr. Rakesh Ghosh to felicitate Dr. Shiv Shankar Das, Coordinator, Uluberia College. Amor. We are honored to acknowledge the presence of a distinguished academician, retired professor and former principal of Mahatma Vasishya College, Latur, Maharashtra. He is present now, Dr. Srikanth Gaikwad. I would like to request Dr. Amor Patro, Assistant Professor, Department of Bengali, to felicitate Sir Dr. Srikanth Gaikwad. Now, I would like to request Dr. Lipika Mondol, Principal, Uluberia College, to deliver the inaugural address. So, requesting ma'am to come on the dais.
এমনি বললে যাবে তাই তো ফোন আছে Very good morning to everyone in this international seminar on Voice from the Margins, Memory, Identity and the Politics of Representation in Contemporary Culture. First, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Devi Chatterjee, retired professor, Department of Interrelationship, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, and today's plenary speaker, Dr. Orijita Shantra, Research Fellow, Department of English and African Literature, Center for Evidence, University of Johannesburg. And IPSC Coordinator of Uluberia College, and Principal from Maharashtra, who is present here from his own interest. Actually, he called me and my departmental colleagues to participate in our auspicious event in this international seminar, and today he is present in our auditorium hall. Thank you, sir. And I would like to extend my warm welcome to you all and all my colleagues, professors from different departments, IQAC coordinator, governing body member, Professor Rakesh Ghosh, Dr. Shiv Shankar Das, and my beloved students. আজকের যে প্রোগ্রাম সেটা কিন্তু বাইলিঙ্গুয়াল হবে। তো আমি একটু মোটামুটি একটু শুরুটাও করলাম, কারণ আমরা আমাদের মধ্যে উপস্থিত রিসোর্স পার্সনদের কাছ থেকে আমরা এই বিষয়ে অনেক কিছু জানবো। এখন মার্জিন, আমরা এখানে একটা ভয়েস ফ্রম দ্য মার্জিনস, এই ওয়ার্ডটা এলো কেন, আমরা কেন তাদেরকে নিয়ে চর্চা করছি? একটু আগে আমরা বিপ্রা ম্যাডামের খুব গলায় খুব সুন্দর করে গানটা শুনলাম, আমার মুক্তি আলোয় আলোয়। আমরা মানে খুব সুন্দর করে কোরিলেট করতে পারছি এই মার্জিনের সঙ্গে। সত্যি কোথাও মনে হয় মুক্তির কোন একটা পথ খোঁজা, বা জেনারেল যারা, জেনারেল মানে আমরা যারা হয়তো সব কিছু পাচ্ছি, জেনারেলি যারা সমস্ত রকমের সুযোগ সুবিধা হয়তো পাচ্ছি বা পাচ্ছি না, সেই রকম জায়গা থেকে হয়তো মার্জিনালাইজড, কিংবা আমাদের সংবিধান অধিকারের ভিত্তিতে জাতি, বর্ণ, ধর্ম নির্বিশেষে আর্থিক অবস্থা, সোশিও ইকোনমিক কন্ডিশন, এগুলোর বেসিসে যে ভাগ বা আইডেন্টিফাই করে দিয়েছে, বাট যেখানে যে ডিভিশনটা রয়েছে আমাদের, সেখান থেকেই হয়তো আমরা আইডেন্টিফিকেশনটা আজকের সেমিনারের খুঁজবো, যে সত্যি কতটা মার্জিনালাইজড, কতটা ডিপ্রাইভড। আর আমরা যারা আজকে এই হলে বসে ইন্টারন্যাশনাল সেমিনারে পার্টিসিপেট করছি, তারা আমরা কতটা এই যে সামনে এগিয়ে আনা, অর্থাৎ আমি সুযোগ পাচ্ছি, আমি আরেকজনের হাত ধরে এই সুযোগটা পাইয়ে দেব বা জানিয়ে দেব যে তুমি এটা পেতে পারো, সেই কাজটা, সেই রিলেশনশিপটা আমরা কতটা বিল্ড আপ করতে পারি, সেটা তো অবশ্যই থাকবে। As we know, the society is always divided into culture and margin. The margin, mostly fragmented and unheard of, this kind of academic program gives enlighten us যে আমরা এটাকে কিভাবে ট্যাকল করব, how do I tackle this problem or this opportunity, বা আমাদের কাছে যেটা অপরচুনিটি নয় সেটাকে কিভাবে আমরা অপরচুনিটিতে কনভার্ট করতে পারি, সেই জায়গাটা আমরা শুনবো আমাদের রিসোর্স পার্সনদের কাছ থেকে, যে এই ভয়েস কতটা কোন কোন সময়ে কোন কোন জায়গায় বিভিন্ন সময়, আমরা যদি হিস্ট্রি দেখি, মানে হিস্ট্রি যদি আমরা স্টাডি করি, তাহলে দেখবো যে একদম ফ্রম দ্য টাইম ইমেমোরিয়াল দেখবো যে আমাদের এই ডিসক্রিমিনেশন কিন্তু ছিল না, একদমই নয়। আর যখন হয়তো ডিপ্রাইভেশন এবং ডিসক্রিমিনেশন কিছু থাকে, তখন হয়তো আমাদের সেই ব্যারিয়ারটাকে ভাঙবার জেদটাও তৈরি হয়, বা কিছু পাবার যে আকাঙ্ক্ষা সেটাও তৈরি হয় আমার মনে হয়। তো সেই রকম আমরা আমাদের ম্যাডাম দেবী, প্রফেসর দেবী চ্যাটার্জি ম্যাডামের কাছ থেকে আমরা এরকম অনেক গল্পই শুনবো। আমি শুনেছি সন্দীপ স্যারের কাছে যে খুব সুন্দর এরকম অনেক রিসার্চের সঙ্গে ম্যাডাম যুক্ত রয়েছেন। ম্যাডামের কাছ থেকে আমরা যে শুনতে পাবো তার এই মূল্যবান সময় থেকে, তিনি এত কাজ অনেক কিছুর সঙ্গে যুক্ত। উনি পেঙ্গুইন পাবলিক সেজ পাবলিকেশনের উনি চিফ এডিটরও। তো আমরা সকলে হয়তো বিভিন্ন যে জার্নাল গুলো সেগুলোকে আমরা রিচ করতে পারি না, আমাদের স্টুডেন্টরা পারে না হয়তো, কিন্তু যে তারা জার্নাল পড়ছে সেরকমটা নয়। কিন্তু আমরা যদি আজকের এই বক্তব্যের মধ্যে দিয়েও তাদের কাছে সত্যি জার্নাল বা এই পাবলিকেশন গুলো পড়ো, এবং তোমরাও যাতে এই রিসার্চে পরবর্তী ক্ষেত্রে পার্টিসিপেট করতে পারো, সেই দিকেও কিন্তু আমাদের অবশ্যই ফোকাস থাকবে। তবে আমরা এই ইন্টারন্যাশনাল সেমিনার গুলো যে সত্যি করা ভ্যালিড, বা কি তোমাদের কি কাজে লাগলো, সেই জায়গাতে নিয়ে যেতে পারবো। অনেক ধন্যবাদ ডক্টর সন্দীপ দলুইকে, যে এমন সুযোগ করে দিয়েছেন, ম্যাডামকে আমাদের মধ্যে উপস্থিত করেছেন। আর আমি আরেকজনকে পেয়ে অত্যন্ত আনন্দিত, আমার সঙ্গে খুব বেশি দিনের পরিচয় নয়, কিন্তু মনে হয় যেন অনেক দিন পরিচিত। অরিজিতা মানে ও শুধু জোহান্সবার্গ ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে রিসার্চ ওয়ার্ক কমপ্লিট, মানে পিএইচডি ওয়ার্ক কমপ্লিট করেছে, এবং এখনো উনি এই রিসার্চ ওয়ার্কের সঙ্গে যুক্ত, এবং ফার্দার যে ওনার স্টাডিজ সেটা নিয়ে উনি বলবেন। আমি ওনার লেকচার শুনেছিলাম এবং আমার খুবই ভালো লেগেছিল। তখন মনে হচ্ছিল যে আমাদের কলেজের স্টুডেন্টরা যদি শুনতে পায়, তাহলে তাদের মধ্যেও কিন্তু এই কালচার বা মার্জিনালাইজেশন, যার একটা বড় লড়াই ছিল আফ্রিকাতে, মানে সাউথ আফ্রিকাতে। আমরা জানি সাউথ আফ্রিকা অনেক দিন পরাধীন ছিল, এবং সেই ফ্রিডমের জন্য যে ফাইট, সেটা আমরা অনেকেই জানি। আমরা প্রত্যেকে বিভিন্ন সময়, হয়তো তোমরা অনেক ছোট, কিন্তু যারা অধ্যাপক তারা মনে হয় এই লড়াইটা আমরা বিভিন্ন প্রতিদিন প্রায় পেপারে দেখতাম যে সাউথ আফ্রিকায় এতজন মারা গেছে, এতজন এই জায়গাতে তারা এইভাবে অত্যাচারিত হয়েছে। তো আমি আবারও আরেকটা জায়গার কথা, আমাদের ওয়েস্ট বেঙ্গলে আমরা থাকি, আমরা প্রত্যেকেই জানি যে আমরা যে মার্জিনালাইজড বা উইকার বা ডিপ্রাইভেশন, তার সঙ্গে মনে হয় আমাদের জঙ্গলমহল পার্টটা খুব বেশি করে যুক্ত। আমার সৌভাগ্য যে আমি একটা দীর্ঘ সময় ওখানের একটি কলেজে অধ্যাপনা করেছি, কিন্তু বর্তমান মানে আমি 20 বছর আগে এবং 20 বছর পরের মধ্যে যে স্টাডিজ গুলো আমি দেখেছি বা যে কম্পারিজনটা আমরা করতে পারি, যে অনেকটা কিন্তু ইমপ্রুভমেন্ট হয়েছে। আগে যখন আমরা দেখতাম বাচ্চাদের, আমি 2008 সালের কথা বলছি, তখন আমি যে ট্রাইবাল ছেলেমেয়েরা ওখানে যারা পড়তে আসতো, তাদের যদি সকালে জিজ্ঞেস করতাম কি খেয়ে এসেছো, ওরা বলতো পাখাল। পাখাল মানে আমরা যাকে বলি পান্তা। দুপুরবেলা যখন আমার ক্লাস মাঝখানে, কিরে কি কি খাচ্ছিস, তোর টিফিনটা কি, আবার সেই পাখাল মানে পান্তা। একটা বাড়ি রান্না হতো, সেটা হয়তো দিনের শেষে, এবং সারাদিন ওই খাবারটাই তারা খেত। তো এটাকে কি আমরা বলবো মার্জিনালাইজড বা ডিপ্রাইভেশন, নাকি আমরা বলবো যে মডার্নিজম, অ্যান্ড দেয়ার ইজ এ ব্যাটল বিটুইন দ্য ট্র্যাডিশনালিজম অ্যান্ড মডার্নিজম? আমার কাছে তিনজন স্কলার রয়েছে যারা ওই এরিয়াতে কাজ করছে, বিভিন্ন মডার্নাইজেশন, আইকেএস এবং ট্র্যাডিশনালিজমের উপর। ট্রাইবাল বিভিন্ন একটা সম্প্রদায় রয়েছে বীরহোর, যারা পুরুলিয়াতে থাকে এবং এক্সটিংক্ট হয়ে যাচ্ছে তারা। তো তাদেরকে আমরা মানে স্টাডি করতে গিয়ে দেখেছি, একটা জায়গাতে 40টা মাত্র ফ্যামিলি থাকে, গভর্নমেন্ট প্রচুর ইনিশিয়েটিভ নিয়েছে তাদের জন্য, কিন্তু তারা ওদের যে ওই মানে পুরনো যে কালচার, সেখান থেকে তারা বেরোতে চায় না। তারা চায় যে তারা শিকার করে মানে প্রাইমারি সোর্স অফ লাইভলিহুড অপশনস, যেগুলো মানে তারা শিকার করেই জীবিকা নির্বাহ করতে চায়। জীবনে খুব বেশি কিছু তাদের চাওয়া পাওয়া নেই, ওর মধ্যেই তারা কিন্তু অ্যাকোমোডেট করছে। খাবার হয়তো যদি রেশনটা না পৌঁছায় সরকারি, তাহলে হয়তো ভাত হবে না। এরকমও গ্রাম আমরা স্টাডি করতে গিয়ে দেখেছি, 1 মাস ওদের একটা বীজ ভেঙে গেছে বলে রেশন পৌঁছচ্ছে না, তো ভাত তারা রান্না করতে পারছে না দুপুরবেলা। কিন্তু তারা ওই যেগুলো ফরেস্ট থেকে পাচ্ছে যেসব ফুডস, সেইগুলোই কিন্তু তারা প্রাইমারি কালেকশন হিসেবে নিচ্ছে, এবং ওটাই ওরা জীবন ধারণ করছে ভাবে। এবং আমাদের এটা একটা লার্নিং লেসনও, যে আমরা যারা মডার্ন সোসাইটিতে বিলং করি, তারা প্রত্যেক দিন যাদের সকালে ঘুমটা ভাঙে হোয়াটসঅ্যাপে গুড মর্নিং আর মনে গুড নাইট বলে বিকেলে, বা আমরা অনেক ইলেকট্রনিক্স গ্যাজেট নিয়ে অভ্যস্ত, আমাদের হয়তো মাইক্রোওভেন ছাড়া, এয়ার ফ্রায়ার ছাড়া আমাদের চলে না দিন, সেখানে মাত্র 2টো ইট আর কয়েকটা গাছের ডাল, এটাই হচ্ছে রসদ রান্নার, এটা হচ্ছে ফুয়েল। তো কত কমেও কিন্তু জীবনযাত্রা নির্বাহ করা যায়, কত আমাদের আধুনিক জীবনে কতটা এক্সেস, সেটাকে আমরা কতখানি শেয়ার করতে পারি, এটাও কিন্তু একটা আমাদের আলোচনার বিষয় থাকবে। আজকে আমরা শুনবো সেগুলো। আর অবশ্যই এনভায়রনমেন্টাল অ্যাওয়ারনেস এখন একটা ভীষণই ওয়ার্ল্ড ওয়াইড একটা খুবই আলোচিত ফেনোমেনা। সেই এনভায়রনমেন্টকে কি করে প্রোটেক্ট করছে আমরা এটাও দেখি যে আমাদের নিজেদের মধ্যে হচ্ছে তুলসী গাছে প্রত্যেকদিন আমরা জল দিই। ওই অঞ্চলগুলোতে যারা অনেকটা হয়তো পিছিয়ে আছে, যাদের কাছে হয়তো বাজ পড়লে বা মানে থান্ডারস্টর্ম হলে হয়তো যে জায়গাটায় তারা গিয়ে আশ্রয় নেবে সেই রকম ধরনের কংক্রিট কোনো রুফ নেই, হয়তো গাছের তলাটাতেই গিয়ে দাঁড়াতে হচ্ছে। যাদের কাছে হয়তো বন্য জন্তুর হাত থেকে রক্ষা পাওয়ার জন্য হয়তো তেমন কোনো প্রোটেকশন কিছু নেই, ওরা ফাইট করছে প্রত্যেক দিন। হাতির আক্রমণ হচ্ছে বা নেকড়ে বা চিতা আমরা তারা আক্রমণ করছে, সুন্দরবনে বাঘ এবং জলে কুমির আর কি, ডাঙায় বাঘ, এরকম ধরনের একটা ব্যাটেল ওরা লড়ছে। তো তাদেরকেও তো আমরা ভাবছি যে তারা মার্জিনালাইজড। তো আমাদের অবশ্যই এটা আমরা ভাববো যে এই আলোচনা থেকে আমাদের নিশ্চয়ই আমরা আমাদের স্টুডেন্টদেরকে আলোকিত করতে পারবো বা তারা এনলাইটেন্ড হবেন যে আগামী দিনে আমাদের মার্জিনালাইজড যে সোসাইটি বা ভয়েসেস ফ্রম দ্য মার্জিনস আমরা কেমন করে সেটাকে রিপ্রেজেন্টেশন করতে পারবো রিসার্চ ওয়ার্কে এবং আমাদের প্রত্যেক দিনকার কমিউনিটি ডেভেলপমেন্ট ওয়ার্কে। আমি আবারও ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি ম্যাডামকে, অরিজিতা ম্যাডামকে, অনেক দূর থেকে এসেছেন মহারাষ্ট্র থেকে প্রিন্সিপাল স্যার, তাকে আইকিউএসি কলেজের সমস্ত উইং এবং সর্বোপরি ডিপার্টমেন্ট অফ ইংলিশ উলুবেড়িয়া কলেজ, আইকিউএসি উলুবেড়িয়া কলেজ এবং ডিপার্টমেন্ট অফ ইংলিশ গঙ্গাধর বিদ্যা মন্দির, যাদের অ্যাসোসিয়েশনে আমরা আজকে এখানে সেমিনার করছি। গঙ্গাধরপুর থেকে কেউ এসছেন? আসছেন। তো আমি আবারও সন্দীপ স্যার, বাসব দত্ত ম্যাডামকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ জানাই, ইংলিশ ডিপার্টমেন্টের সকলকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। খুব সুন্দর হোক আজকের অনুষ্ঠানের জন্য আমার অনেক শুভেচ্ছা রইল। থ্যাংক ইউ। এটা
Now I would like to request Dr. Shiv Shankar Das, I think he called to say some words.
এটা
Respected Principal Madam, distinguished speaker, esteemed spirited scholars, prepared presenters, and my dear colleagues and friends, good morning to all of you. It's both an honor and privilege to welcome you to this international seminar. The theme we gathered around today is not merely theoretical, it's deeply human. It asks us to reconsider who speaks, who is heard, which remains invisible within the ground narratives, culture, and history. When I was a student, the word margin had a very simple practical meaning. It was the space carefully drawn on the left side of the answer sheet with the scale, neat, straight, and disciplined. Later as a teacher, the margin became the place where we wrote marks, comments, corrections, and judgments. In both cases, margin appeared secondary, not the main body of the writing, but the narrow border that framed it. However, in contemporary critical disclosure, the idea of margin carries a far deeper and more complex meaning. It's no longer merely a physical space or paper. It represents social, culture, and political cohesion. I'm a student of mathematics. I am very bad in literature, but I love to see movie. In the context of this seminar, I can remember the haunting final scene of Meghanada Tara, directed by Dr. Khoro. There is a scene, Nita cry, Dada, I must say, brother, I want to leave. This is not merely an individual's plea. This is the voice of a displaced generation in post-partition Bengal. Her identity is shaped by loss, migration, and sacrifice. As a refugee woman bearing the burdens of her family, her individuality dissolves into responsibility. That cry becomes the assertion of a self-long suppressed. Identity here is the inseparable from historical trauma and collective memory. And I can recall another famous film, their name is Pink, where lawyer portrayed by the Amitabh Bachchan firmly declares, no means no. This line is simply simple but revolutionary. That dismantles centuries of patriarchal assumptions about consent, respectability, and gender morality. The young women in the film stand in the margins of the social credibility, but through a legal and moral assertions. Their voices are restored, the representation are become resistance. These seminars offer us a platform to critically examine this intersection of memory and identity. It invites us to rethink, achieves to interrogate dominant narratives and to amplify voices that have long been muted. As an academic community, our task is not to analyze, but as to empathize, not to theorize, but also to humanize. These margins are not distant territories. It exists within our institution, our cities, our classrooms, and sometimes within ourselves. On the behalf of IPSC, extend my heartfelt gratitude to our distinguished speakers, paper presenters who have traveled from different parts of the state and abroad who share their insights. Your scholarships enrich this forum and strengthens our collaborative pursuit of knowledge. I also sincerely thank the organizing committee, the Department of English, faculty members, students, and all those who have worked tirelessly behind the scene to make this seminar possible. Your dedication exemplifies the collaborative spirit of academia. In these words, I once again welcome you all and wish the educational seminar great success. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I would like to request Mr. Rakesh Ghosh, GE HOD Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science. Good morning, all of you. I especially thanks to the Department of English to give me such opportunity to say something in this platform, and it's my pleasure. I also thanks to our honorable today's speaker. Also thanks to our honorable principal, Devika Mondol, and our honorable president, Bulab Rai, for supporting us to execute such type of program. I also thanks our all beloved students. So I think this is a very interesting topic in this time, and this is very high time to think about this topic. Can you imagine in this 21st century when we think about, when we deeply embarked in industrialization, urbanization, modernization, but on the other hand, we see always in this India till date crime like honor killing are happening. Last 2024 in Tamil Nadu, we see the news. 19 years old Aishwarya was killed her parents. This is the very unfortunate to us. So this is a very high time, especially our students. I think and I believe this type of seminar also inculcates the democratic values, the human rights, and the social clearance in our students' mind. And believe this type of seminar also empower our students by fostering such type of thinkings about the existing social discrimination in our Indian society. So I deeply expect our students in future will try at their best to stage such type of protest against the such type of discrimination and the ongoing caste system that exists in the Indian society. And এর সাথে সাথে আরো যেটা বলি সেটা হচ্ছে এই ধরনের সেমিনার শুধুমাত্র এই সেমিনার কক্ষের মধ্যেই এই আলোচনাটা সীমায়িত যাতে না থাকে, তার জন্য আজকে স্টুডেন্টদের সত্যি ভাবতে হবে যে এই আলোচনাটা শুধুমাত্র আজ এখানে শুনে চলে গেলাম এবং এর যে এক্সিকিউশন, এর যে একটা সময় এসেছে। আজকে কলেজের বাইরে গিয়ে, সেমিনার করতে বাইরে গিয়ে সমাজের প্রতি নিয়ত যেভাবে এখনো পর্যন্ত সবথেকে অবাক লাগে যে একবিংশ শতকে যেভাবে আজও পর্যন্ত সমাজের একটা বৃহত্তর অংশ যারা তথাকথিত প্রান্তিক বা মার্জিনালাইজ হিসাবে চিহ্নিত, রিকগনাইজ, এই সকল মানুষগুলো তাদের মধ্যে তাদের কি সত্যি তারা ডেমোক্রেটিক ভ্যালুটাকে ইগনোর করতে পারছে, সত্যি তারা কনস্টিটিউশনাল রাইট গুলোকে তারা পাচ্ছে, তাদের জায়গা থেকে ভাবার সত্যি আর কি সময় আছে। আমরা প্রত্যেকেই শুনেছি যে এই সরকার তো ডক্টর বি আর আম্বেদকর চলবে তো আমরা জ্যোতিরাও শুনেছি, এই নিয়ে প্রচুর লেখা রণবীর সমাচার, এই নিয়ে সাবধান স্টাডি রাজনীতি অফ হিস্ট্রি ভাবে প্রচুর লেখা। কিন্তু আমি চাইছি এবং আমার আজকে আবেদন এই ধরনের চিন্তা ভাবনার এক্সিকিউশন কিন্তু এবার না হলে কিন্তু এই সমাজ থেকে এই ধরনের জ্ঞানকে আমরা দূর করতে দিতে পারবো না। এটা আলোচনা
Okay. Now, it is my immense pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Devi Chatterjee. She will deliver the keynote lecture titled Dalit Women's Voices in Bangla, Writings of Protest and Assertion. Professor Devi Chatterjee is a distinguished academic and scholar in the field of international relations, human rights and social studies. She served as a professor in the Department of International Relations at Jadavpur University, Kolkata, where she made significant contributions to teaching, research and academic leadership. In addition to her role at Jadavpur University, she has served as a visiting professor in the Department of Human Rights and Human Development, Uluberia University. And professor in the Department of Political Science, Uluberia University. Sociology, University of Calcutta as a guest lecturer, and has served faculty in the Human Rights Program under the Department of Anthropology, University of Calcutta. Professor Chatterjee also held important academic responsibilities at Jadavpur University. She served as a coordinator of the Center for Refugee Studies, International Relations. She was also the coordinator of the postgraduate diploma course in Human Rights and Duties in the same department, contributing to the development of structured academic programs in the field of human rights. Her areas of specialization include Dalit studies, Indian society and social problems, human rights, gender studies, public administration. Her academic work reflects a deep engagement with the issues of caste, social justice, equality, identity, and democratic rights in India. Professor Chatterjee is the author of several important and widely cited books. Her major works include Dalit Rights, Human Rights, Ideas and Movements Against Caste in India, Ancient to Modern Times, Up Against Caste, a comparative study of Ambedkar and period, Sociology of National Integration, Marxist Thought in India, and Kalar Volcano. It was published by KLM Private Limited, Calcutta, 1981. A significant study of racism in South Africa based on a PhD dissertation. In addition to these, she has co-edited books and contributed numerous research articles to reputed journals and edited volumes. She is also the founder editor, chief editor of the journal Contemporary of Dalit, published by Sage Publications India, New Delhi. The journal has emerged as an important platform for critical scholarship on caste, marginality, and social transformation. Through her scholarship, teaching, and editorial leadership, Professor Devi Chatterjee has made substantial contributions to the study of caste, human rights, and social justice in India. Her academic journey reflects a sustained commitment to rigorous research and socially relevant scholarship. We are truly honored to have such among us today. She will deliver the keynote lecture today. So I would like to request Professor Devi Chatterjee to come on the dais and to deliver a lecture. Thank you. Yeah. নামিয়ে দিতে হবে। হ্যাঁ, বললাম তো। না।
Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed a great honor to be invited today to this international seminar. I must thank respected Principal Madam, the organizers of the seminar. My regards to the noted academicians present here, and my wishes for the students. We are talking about margins. When we talk of margins in a society, we have to remember that it is not accidental that someone is in the margin. এটা কাকতালীয় নয় যে একজন মার্জিনে আছে। We are looking at a system where people are in the margins because they are systematically marginalized. So we have to look at margins in connection with marginalization. That is my first point that I would like to draw your attention to. অর্থাৎ খুব সিস্টেম্যাটিক ভাবে কাউকে মার্জিনে ঠেলে দেওয়া হয়। What does it mean to be in the margins? It means denial of goods and services. It means denial of dignity. It means denial of basic human rights. That is what being in the margins means. A person in the margin is denied basic human rights, goods and services on a regular basis, and importantly, dignity. Dignity is something that cannot be measured. We can measure the rest. In the sense, I can say how many people did not get a lunch or a breakfast, or did not get a good salary. But how many people were being humiliated is not measurable. The persons humiliated understand. Those humiliating them do not understand. So looking at the margins can be done from different angles. Someone who is not in the margin might look at the margin, with full sympathy, with a very delicate understanding. But that viewpoint would be different in many ways from the voice of the person who is there in the margin and who speaks up. Now, this is a very, very, I would say, delicate issue. In fact, a very debatable issue also. Because there are many who would say that voices of others are equally significant as voices from the margins or those who are victimized. My position would be, of course, their voices are very valuable. If I speak for a person in the margin, my voice, I would believe, would be valuable, but it would not be the same as that of the person in the margin unless I belong to that category. That understanding is different. I will give a very, very simple example. খুব সাধারণ একটা উদাহরণ দেব. All of you have experienced the COVID period. Before that, all of you have sometime or the other read about epidemics or seen the stories of epidemics in movies, read about them in books, etc. But tell me, your experiences of the COVID and your knowledge of the COVID from the books, were they knowledge of epidemics from the books, were they the same? They were not. Everything changed. Your experiences were very different. No amount of reading would bring you to that level. That is the same picture that I'm trying to bring into focus here. Someone in the margin knows what it is to suffer in the margins. No one outside that level could have that amount of understanding. It is lived experience. And I emphasize here the importance of lived experience. From there, let me come to another point. Marginality, or being in the margins, or being forced into the margins, is, we can say, a phenomenon we find in different countries. In fact, worldwide almost, on different grounds. But when we are looking at India, it has a very peculiar, unique characteristic. Here, marginality is largely defined by the presence of a particular type of stratification in society. The Hindu Brahminical system. There's no denying that it makes for marginality. And that is a marginality that has developed over several thousands of years. Caste stratification of society. It makes for caste stratification of society. It makes for a hierarchy. ধাপে ধাপে সাজানো জাতি ব্যবস্থা। একদম উপরে ব্রাহ্মণরা, একদম নিচে যাদের অস্পৃশ্য জাতি বলা হয় তাদের, অতি শূদ্র, অচ্ছুত, নানা রকমের নামে তারা পরিচিত হয়। এই হায়ারার্কির মধ্যে যদি আমরা দেখি, একেবারে ওপরে যারা সমস্ত সুযোগ সুবিধের সম্মানের দাবিদার তারা। As you move down the ladder, you will find right at the bottom, the people are those who are totally marginalized, who lack dignity, who are said not to have a culture. They are supposedly people without a culture, though they have their own very rich cultures. They are people who, in technical terms, are today referred to in terms of the Constitution, people who are the scheduled castes. In social parlance and political parlance, the Dalits. Lowest in the hierarchy, minus dignity, minus access to many goods and services even today, victims of lynching almost on a day-to-day basis, the newspapers will bear it out. I need not say that. In a democratic India, that is the picture, that is the reality. I'm not going into those social dimensions. I think all of us here are aware of it. Also in the margins are the tribal population, which Principal Madam was speaking about. They are also amongst the lowest sections of the population group, denied basic human rights. But outside this broad Hindu-Brahminical frame, they are constitutionally speaking referred to as the scheduled tribes. Scheduled because listed, in other words, in order that certain facilities may be given to them to overcome some of the hardships that they face, just as the scheduled caste. Now, my discussion here will be focusing on the Dalit women, Dalit writings in Bangla, in Bengal. Now, when I look at Dalits as such, I have already said they are in the margins totally. They were victims of the practice of untouchability, suffer various disabilities, despite constitutional, it's more like too little too late. It does not compensate for their sufferings. Apart from that, they are still victims of violations in many ways. Now, when I'm talking about Dalit women, we are talking really about women within these communities. Dalits are not just one caste category. Multiple castes suffering from these disabilities, and women of these communities. At a point of time, they were largely being overlooked. It was assumed, from two angles, I would say, it was being assumed that, well, if women's voices come up, a separate category of Dalit women need not be considered. Their voices would be reflected in what we can refer to as the women's voices, or the women's organizations' voices, or feminist voices. From another angle, it was being assumed that, well, if the voices of Dalits come up through the Dalit movements, no one needs to talk about Dalit women separately. So they were falling in the crevices. The women's movement was not talking about Dalit women. The Dalit movement was not talking about Dalit women separately. Both were assuming that, well, they are there, they're with these, and separate representation is not required. From this emerges Dalit feminism. From this dissatisfaction emerges Dalit feminism. From the late 1980s, we can say these voices become particularly loud. Though in numerical terms they are small, but they are articulate voices demanding space for themselves. That we need to be heard. I would these issues. That they have distinct, their lived experiences are not simply to be subsumed within the experiences of the category of women per se, or within the category of Dalits per se. Because in the Dalit movement, the voices of men have been prominent for obvious reasons. In the women's movement, the voices of upper caste, upper class, or at least middle class, upper middle class women have been more prominent. So that was the area from which Dalit feminism really comes up. I'm clear on this point. মানে নারী আন্দোলনের দিকে যখন আন্দোলন হচ্ছে মোটামুটি 1980-র দশকের আগে পর্যন্ত আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি যে সেই আন্দোলনের নেতৃত্ব যারা দিচ্ছেন তারা বর্ণ হিন্দু, উঁচু জাতির, উঁচু নৈতিক অবস্থানে আছেন, উচ্চ শিক্ষিতা এই মহিলারা, তারা আলাদা করে দলিত মহিলাদের কথা সেইভাবে আর সেই স্পেসটা দিচ্ছেন না। আবার দলিত আন্দোলনে যারা, তারা অধিকাংশ পুরুষ বা প্রায় সবাই পুরুষ, তাদের কাছে মেয়েদের আলাদা করে তাদের সম্পর্কে, তাদের ঘরের মেয়েদের কথা বলার খুব একটা জায়গা নেই। So that was the situation. But the existential realities of Dalit women seem to be different. In fact, I would say between caste on the one hand, their Dalit status, lowest caste, their gender, their women, and also their class. In the vast majority of cases, because they are Dalits, they are also economically poor, poorer than, on an average than other sections of the population. That is the general scenario that we find. So their voices nonetheless do come up. Their struggles take on multiple lives. In different ways, they try to assert themselves. And of that, one is literature. A very powerful tool that they use is literature. Now here, we need to remember when we are talking of literature, since you are, many of you students of literature, let us not forget the importance of oral literature. Apart from the written word, which is almost always in the vernacular, let us not forget that literacy levels on an average amongst the Dalits is lesser than amongst the general population. And when we are looking at their women, it is still lesser, or in the past, it was much lesser. And in that scenario, much of the literature that we can think of is also oral literature. By the word of the mouth, stories are told, poems are composed and transmitted from generation to generation. That also has to be taken note of and used as a tool to counter the argument that Dalits do not have a culture. Think of that literature which adds to their contributions in the written form. Coming to, we have a limited amount of time, I know, but still I'll try to structure my discussion within the time limit. Now, coming to Bengal very specifically, I've already made the comment that when you're looking at Dalit literature, and of course women's writings, Dalit literature in general, it is mostly in the vernacular, whichever region it is. Whichever region it is that we are finding that literature, it is mostly in the vernacular. Some amount of it gets translated in subsequent years, but it is in the vernacular. So when we are looking at Dalit literature in Bengal, the women's writings, it is vernacular literature that we are looking at. That's one point that is another point that has to be taken note of in this respect is that while I spoke of margins, the Brahminical system leading to the marginalization of the Dalit population across the country, there are certain unique features in different parts of the country which make the story different, which add to the marginalization, which add to their woes, and which have to be given a separate amount of attention. In the case of Bengal, it is the partition, the history of the partition. That is something that needs to be kept in mind. Particularly in view of the fact, I'm slightly digressing, I know. The problem is we tend to compartmentalize our disciplines. We need to know a bit of history also. Before the partition, a sizable section of the Dalit population resided in the eastern districts of Bengal. Districts which, after the partition, went over to East Pakistan. When there's a refugee flow, a sizable section of this population comes to West Bengal. And a big section of that refugee population, particularly that came after 1950, the Dalit category. So they were doubly in trouble. Caste plus their refugee status, their sufferings were untold. That is the Dalit population. Now, so we have to keep in mind the partition. About literature, about writings of Dalit women, they have been writing. There are not too many Dalit women writing in contributing to the literary field, but there are some prominent voices. Some prominent voices, including Kalyani Thakur Charal, whose book, whose autobiography is Ami Keno Charal Likhi. For those who do not know Bengali or do not understand Bengali, I would say Charal is an abusive word of a low caste. It's an abusive low caste word. And the title of her book says, why do I add this Charal word to my name? Because she belongs to a low caste which was abused as Charal. So she adds Charal to her name, and her autobiography refers to that question. She poses that question very pronouncedly. Also, another very prominent voice here is Lily Haldar, whose autobiography Bhanga Berar Panchali was followed by Otho Lilaboti Kotha, the second part of that autobiography, Otho Lilaboti Kotha. Now, Kolani's work was published in 2016, and there were no autobiographies of Dalit women, most probably, as she puts it. Lily Haldar's works come later. The first one, Bhanga Berar Pachali, comes in 2019, and the next comes the next year in 2020. They write, apart from them, we have Manjubala writing, we have Snifiko Hauladar writing, we have writings from plays of Nomita Dash. So we have some Bengali Dalit authors who have been writing. They have been writing poems, short stories, novels, autobiographies, etc. In my assessment, it's rather scary to talk amongst scholars of languages. They may criticize me on that count, but nevertheless, I would put it this way. In my assessment, somewhere in the writings, we can't always categorize these writings as compartmentalized categories. Within everything, there seems to be a trickling in of the autobiographical element. It's the life story that they talk about. When they write the poem, it's their life story. When they're writing a short story, it's their life story. It's a reflection of their life story, which they are doing, which when you're looking at other authors, of non-Dalit authors, in many cases you can clearly say, well, these are short stories, these are poems, these are autobiographies. Cut them up into compartments and put them for the sake of knowledge. But when you're looking at these women writing, or for that matter, even the Dalit men, when you're looking at these women writing, you will find that their writings, their autobiographical writings really tend to permeate into all these categories. Because they're very emotional about their lived experiences. It's very real. The lived experiences are very real and permeate their day-to-day existence even today. So it might have been a reality of the past. As I said, it might have been poverty in the village, it might have been the history of the partition, but it's lived reality. Coming to another point, I would draw your attention, that is the significant contributions that have been made in the case of Dalit writings. Dalit women's writings have come from the Nomoshudro community. This is a large Dalit community of Bengal, of southern Bengal. You will find the Nomoshudra community is also a large section of that population group which I had referred to earlier as being victims of the partition and coming over from East Pakistan. It was then East Pakistan, not Bangladesh. Coming over from East Pakistan into India as refugees. The Nomoshudros were a bulk of that population group. Now, amongst the Nomoshudro community, we find a sizable section of women who have become literate. Now, this is a community also. Many of you might be aware of the fact that their literacy level is very, very high as a whole, higher than the average literacy level of the general population. I'll give you some figures from the 2011 census, the latest census that we have had, which you will find very interesting, I think. The overall literacy population of the community, Nomoshudra community as a whole, was said to be 79.5%. For the general population, it was 74.04%. The male literacy level was, for the Nomoshudra population, it was 85.1%. For the general population, it was 82.14%. For the females, from amongst whom we get these writers, both Kollani, Lili Halda, they all belong to the Nomoshudra community. We get these writers. For the females, the literacy level was 73.6%, high literacy level. For the general population, it was 65.46%. So overall, I think you can understand that the literacy level of the Nomoshudra population is very high. The level of consciousness is very high. I have already referred to the partition impact. There are certain other dimensions which need to be kept in mind when we are looking at the writings of these authors. I have already referred to Dalit feminism. Earlier, the impact of the Dalit Panther movement in Maharashtra was a drive for the emergence of Dalit literature in other parts of the country, including Bengal. And its impact is felt when we are looking at the writings of Dalit women as well. Of course, in the backdrop, there is the influence of Ambedkar's ideas and the Ambedkarite movement. That is uniformly present. Whichever the political viewpoint is, whichever the economic condition is, Ambedkar is there in the background. The respect for Ambedkar and his ideas. The differences come after that or below that. But there's a point where everything merges into one identity category. Also, the impact of the Horichand Guruchand movement and the Mutua movement, which was led by them. That is also a significant aspect which has to be looked into. Now, in this category, we have to thus understand how the writings get structured. When Dalit women are writing, they are Dalits, their sufferings are there, their poverty is there, their partition is there to give them their lived experiences, and also their gender is there. I think I have a little bit of time, and with the permission of the organizers, I shall read out brief portions of two books which I selected. One is Kalyani Thakur Charal's Ami Keno Charal Likhi, her autobiography. Where in the first page itself, in the beginning of the autobiography, she says, I hope most of you understand Bengali. This is a very harsh way of putting it, but I'll read it out. আমি বড় হওয়ার পর আমার জন্মের কথা বহুবার বাবার মুখে শুনেছি। আমার মায়ের ইচ্ছে আমার জন্ম, আর কটা দিন বাদে তাদের মিলন হলে আমি ছেলে হয়ে জন্মাতাম, বাবা তাই বলতে। Such a harsh reality. She says, I was born. About my birth, I had heard a lot from my father. I was born on the basis of my mother's wish. If my parents had united at a different point of time, after a few days, I would have been born as a son. So the attitude, how gender is being constructed here, is significant. ছোটবেলায় আমাকে ছেলেদের পোশাকই বেশি পরানো হতো, চালচলনও ছিল খানিকটা পুরুষালী, এটসেট্রা। আমার জন্মের পর কেউই খুব একটা খুশি হতে পারেনি। No one was happy after my birth. প্রথমত I was dark complexioned, so no one was happy. So looking back, thinking about what is lost. আমাদের আত্মীয় স্বজনের প্রায় সকলের কাছেই শুনেছি নলদির হাট, মধুমতির মাছ বেশি ভালো এখানকার সবকিছুর চেয়ে। Past, trying to build up that past, think about that past. তাদের ফেলে আসা গ্রাম, নদী, হাট সব আমাদের চেনা, গ্রামগুলো পর্যন্ত, etc., etc. I shall not take up much of your time here. Just moving on from Kalyani's work, I'm moving to Lily Haldar's Otho Lilavati Kotha. If you get an opportunity, when you get an opportunity to read these autobiographies, I would suggest they are not very lengthy books, as you can see. When you get the opportunity, just look through them. Very vivid pictures of lived experience come up. Now, let's see what Lilavati says. Lily Haldar is Lilavati, or rather was Lilavati, and her name was cut down to Lily. At different points in school and around, people cut her name down to Lily. So she became Lily Haldar. Both of them are well educated, Kalyani as well as Lily Haldar. Both of them have been in government service. Both of them now have retired. So that is that is Lily Haldar writing about herself, Lilavati, the small Lilavati, when she grew up, what she thought. বাবা মা ওকে দিয়ে কেন এত সংসারের কাজ করাতেন? ওর যা বয়স তাতে খেলাধুলো করবে, ওর বন্ধুরা তো তাই করে। Why do her parents make her do so much of domestic work? At her age, she should be playing. Her friends play. অথচ ওকে ছোট ছোট ভাই বোনদের সামলাতে হতো। She had to look after her siblings. এই কারণে সুযোগ পেলেই ও গ্রামের বাড়ি চলে যেত। খেতে বসলেও ভাইদের থালায় বড় মাছ, ওর থালায় ছোট। When she was given food, the brothers were given the larger piece of fish and she was given the smaller piece of fish. এই নিয়ে ও একদিন মাকে বলেছিল, কিন্তু কোনো লাভ হয়নি। চিররুগ্ন লীলাবতী মনে মনে কাঁদতো আর ভাবতো ওর বন্ধুরা কত আনন্দে আছে। That was the life of Lily Haldar, that she was within the family. It is a Dalit family. Within that family, how gender plays out. Her status as a woman is very decisive there, and she is being victimized. This is something, a voice that is very distinct from the male Dalit voice. It is not the male Dalit voice that is coming up here. Yet the picture of poverty is there, marginalization is there, but gender works out. Another part, again, a very rough sort of statement. I shall read this. কলকাতায় এলে লীলাবতীর কত কাজ, তখন ও তৃতীয় বা চতুর্থ শ্রেণীতে পড়ে। When she used to come to Calcutta, she had lots of work. She was in class 3 or 4. ঘর গোছানো, মার সঙ্গে কাজ করা, দোকান যাওয়া, to do the household work and work with her mother and go to the shop, etc. তার উপর কারো কাছ থেকে টাকা ধার চাইতে হলে ওর বাবা ওকে পাঠাতেন। If a loan had to be taken from someone, her father would send her. বাবার এক বন্ধু জীবন বাবু ওদের পাড়ায় থাকতেন। ওর বাবা লীলাবতীকে বলে পাঠালেন, যা 5 টাকা ধার করে নিয়ে আয়, বলবি আমি চেয়েছি। Her father sent her to his friend saying, bring 5 rupees, say I have asked for it. ও বাবার কথা মতো মাথা নেড়ে লাফাতে লাফাতে জীবন বাবুর বাড়ি গেল। জীবন বাবু একা থাকতেন। কিছুকাল আগে তার স্ত্রী মারা গেছেন। সুদর্শন, লম্বা। ওকে দেখে কি আপ্যায়ন, বললেন টাকা নিয়ে যাবি ঠিক, আগে একটু বস। তারপর মেঝেতে লুঙ্গি খুলে বসলেন, এক্সেট্রা এক্সেট্রা এক্সেট্রা। বাড়িতে ফিরে বাবাকে রাগ করে বলে লীলাবতী, আর কোনোদিন জীবন বাবুর কাছে আমাকে পাঠাবে না। বাবা কোনো প্রশ্ন করলেন না। কেমন নিরুত্তা। পরে লীলাবতী জেনেছে ওই লোক অনেক ছোট ছেলে মেয়ের সঙ্গে এইরকমই আচরণ করেছেন। সালটা 1965-66. The father understood that this person was abusive of his daughter, but he did not have a voice to say anything because he was poor, because he had to take that 5 rupees from him. And hence he had to stay silent when he knew everything, that the girl was being abused by this person, this moneylender. So that is Leelabati's autobiography. Now, I have just tried to give you a picture of the writings, the autobiographical writings. I don't know, do I have a little more time, 5 minutes or something? Poems of Lily Haldar and Colette. Lily Haldar. These poems are also very, very interesting poems. ছেঁড়া কাঁথার স্বপ্ন. Lily Haldar is writing. ছেঁড়া কাঁথায় সুখ, স্বপ্নের ভিড়, ছেঁড়া মাদুরে রাত পড়ি ঘুমোয়, ভাঙা হাড়িতে দিনান্তের খুদকুড়ো, শিউলি জানে গাছ কখন যুবতী হয়। Shuli, I think you know, Shuli belongs to that category who collect the juice from the trees. মানে এই গুড়ের রস যারা আনে পারে তাদের শিউলি বলা হয় সেই ক্যাটেগরির লোকেদের। চোখে তার পৃথিবীর ভাঙা গড়া, শিউলির জীবন কিরকম সেইটা বলছে। সমাজ ব্রাত্য করেছে মানুষের সমাজ, আহা জ্যোৎস্না এসে সারা রাত কাছে থাকে, because he has to get up very early and go to the tree and collect that from the tree. জ্যোৎস্না এসে সারা রাত কাছে থাকে মাটির কাঁচা ছোট্ট ভাঙা ঘরে। শীতে সে যৌবনবতী, বসন্তে সাদা ফুল, শিউলি জানে রসের গভীরে, গ্রীষ্মে ঝরে রস বকুল। ছেঁড়া কাঁথার স্বপ্ন ওইটাতে, কালেকশনটায় 2014 লিলি হালদারের কিছু ফুল কুড়োতে হয় শিউলি যেমন, এই বইটাতে এই কবিতাটা বেরিয়েছিল। আরো কিছু কবিতা আছে, আমি তার মধ্যে যাচ্ছি না। দারিদ্র সম্পর্কে, জেলে পাড়ায় সেদিন বাগের খাওয়া, পাকা ঘরে হাসে রূপালী মাছ, অভক্ত রাত চোখ পাহারায়, জোয়ার এলে মিন ধরতে যায়। মিন ধরা তো জানো, মাছের চারাগুলো ধরা, যেটাকে নদীর চরের ছবিটা আসছে। ইছামতির এপার ওপার ভাগ, শীতের দিনে পারে ধূর্ত কুমির, the risks of collecting the fish. কেওড়া বনে হরিণ ছোটাছুটি, বড় গাছে মৌমাছির মৌচাক, গভীর রাতে ডিঙি নৌকা চলে, ছোট্ট সে খরস্রোতা নদী, ভাটায় সে গেল বনের দিকে, জোয়ার জলে আসে না ফিরে। You know what happened in the forests? The tiger killed the person. That is Lili Haldar's presentation of poverty of the person who's doing low caste poverty, and the woman who stays at home, maybe. Kalyani Thakur Charal, আধারে ও মেয়ে, যে মেয়ে আধার বনে তার কথা বলে দিল জ্যোৎস্নার কানে, যে মেয়ে ঘরের কোণে জোনাকিও তার কথা জানে, যে মেয়ে বাট না বাটে শিল নোড়া তার সহচরী। The vivid picture of the girl at home. মশলা জানে তার ভাষা, আদা লঙ্কা জিরে পোস্তকারী। চমৎকার মনে হয় কঠিন মেয়েটিকে, ঘাম মুছে তুলে নেওয়া পুরনো চোয়াল সহ আধার মানকে। So this is the picture of the life of the Dalit girl. Poverty, under the pressure of domestic churnings, under the pressure of patriarchy, caste, gender, poverty, all these tend to crush the Dalit woman, whose voices, in spite of that, surface in their own ways, own very distinct ways, I'd say, something that the male Dalit voice will not reflect or will not be capable of reflecting. The upper caste Dalit woman, non-Dalit woman would not be able to reflect, or anyone looking at it from outside will not be able to understand or appreciate fully. It is their lived experience which gets reflected through their writings. I've just given some examples of their writings, both autobiographical writings as well as a few poems. There is much more which you would find interesting. So once again, I would request you to take an in-depth analysis of these viewpoints of Dalit women in Bengal. There is a lot. The writings of Dalit women do not come to the surface very often because big publishing houses generally do not bring out their books. Big newspapers do not give reports on them. It is the small publications that bring out their works, or in many cases, they are even self-published. So you've got to really search for it and find it out. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for your enlightening and thought-provoking lecture. Professor Devi Chatterjee's lecture focused on the double marginalization of the women in Indian society and literature. She argued that Dalit women occupy a unique and vulnerable position because they face oppression both as Dalits and as women. While the Dalit movement has historically centered on the struggle of Dalit men, mainstream feminist movements have often overlooked the specific socio-cultural realities of Dalit women. As a result, their voices have remained comparatively less heard, though they are gradually gaining visibility. She highlighted that the authentic voices of Dalit women are preserved most powerfully in oral traditions and vernacular literature, where lived experiences of suffering, resistance, and survival are directly articulated. The experiences of partition refugees in West Bengal around 1950s were discussed as a key historical context. Dalit women from East Pakistan, particularly from Namoshudra community, endured double trauma, displacement due to partition and continuous caste stigma in refugee life. Professor Chatterjee referred to autobiographical literary writings by Dalit women such as Lili Haldar, Bhanga Bedar Pachali, Otho Lilavati Kotha, Pollami Thakur Chadal's Amio Kano Chadal Likhi, Sritikona Haldar and Namita Dash's writings also. These writers, though poems, novels and autobiographies foreground lived realities, poverty, caste discrimination, refugee struggles, and gender sufferings. Their works transform personal narratives into collective social testimony. She also noted an important sociological observation. Literacy levels among refugee Dalit women, especially in Namoshudra community, were comparatively high, which enabled them to articulate their experiences in writings. The ideological influence of B.R. Ambedkar and the socio-religious reformist impact of the Mathura movement in Bengal were identified as significant forces empowering Dalit assertions and consciousness. Through autobiographical references such as father's preference for a male child in Professor Chatterjee illustrated how patriarchy intersects with caste operations within Dalit communities themselves. Overall, the lecture emphasized that Dalit women's literature is fundamentally experiential, rooted in memory, displacement, caste identity, and gender struggle. Their writings challenges dominant narratives and demand recognitions within both Dalit discourse and feminist policy. So thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for your enlightening and thought-provoking lecture. Now, we will open the floor for a discussion session of 10 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes. If you have any question, then you can ask directly to ma'am. So now for the question and answer session. If you have any question. Hello.
for that wonderful session. So I got to know the names of many texts which I was not aware of, and one of them is Amikano Chara. So one thing, Amikano Chara. So এই যে শব্দটা এই শব্দটা টেক্সটে রিপ্লেস করা হচ্ছে as far as I understood it. So one thing that I was wondering, who has the power to reclaim? Is it always people who are on the side of the margins? Because এরকম mad pride movement হয়েছে, সেখানে the word mad was reclaimed by those who were stigmatized for their insight. Or even the word chapri. Chapri শব্দটা আমরা খুব casually use করি, but it's only a few months ago that I got to know that it is a bastard star. তো এটা কি শুধুমাত্র যারা মার্জিনে আছে তাদের কাছেই পাওয়ারটা আছে টু রিক্লেম দিস ওয়ার্ডস, অর যারা তাদের অ্যালাইজ support system can they do the same, and what problem occurs when they are doing it? So this is something that I wanted to ask. And also, since you talked about this distinction between knowledge and lived experience when it comes to the writing, this is not a question, but I just thought that probably the role of affect in this context can be considered. কারণ যখনই আমরা affect বলি বা emotion বলি, we usually think it is anti-rational.
কন্টেনার নামিয়ে দিয়ে ব্যাগগুলো নিয়ে আবার আনতে যাচ্ছে।
কিন্তু এই ক্ষেত্রে Dalit studies হয়তো সেভাবে it can be seen as concerns, epistemological, traditionally epistemic বলে আমরা যেটাকে বলে এসেছি। So that was also an observation.
আরেকটা মাইক
About emotion being an anti-rational, I don't think emotion is emotion might be anti-rational, it might not. It depends. Because emotion goes out to certain ways of speaking. And those experiences are valid. And what goes out of it is not necessarily tangible. It is your scientific experiment. About defining Picard identity is a challenge. It's the same way in which the Dalit word, the word Dalit, virtually gets reclaimed from the level of the Dalits themselves. But at the same time is also criticized from amongst Dalits that do not call us Dalits is one viewpoint. That also comes up, that viewpoint also comes up from the Dalits. Whereas using the word Dalit was done very forcefully by the Dalit Action movement. Very assertively it was being done. But at the same time, there have been people who are very strongly opposed to the use of the term Dalit. It's the same picture here. Using the word Kara as a challenge, that I belong to this community, I challenge your community. What you will impose on me at different levels and categories. I'm not shying off from that. So that boldness of voice, sure, but at the same time, where that leads to, I would say it's very difficult to see how others respond to it, how others would accept it or reject it.
ও এটা কি করবো?
My name is Farzana Khatun, and I'm an undergraduate student from this college. So I have a question that despite relatively high literacy rates among Dalits, why does gender inequality continue to exist within the community? And they have also experienced such kind of discrimination. Why they are not that much sympathetic to the ladies? They are their literacy rate is high and they have also experienced such discrimination, yet they are not sympathetic to a person in their household. Only because of
this is what patriarchy is all about. The impact of patriarchy is present not only in certain sections of the population, but by and large, I would say it is overwhelming. Only very small sections may be excluded from that. And here, though they have experienced the suffering of marginality, when it comes to dealing with women in the house, patriarchal norms are very dominant. But at the same time, I would disagree with certain scholars who insist that Dalit women are the worst off. In terms of patriarchy, if we are looking at it from that angle also, Dalit women also have certain advantages. Advantages which grow out of their situation. That is their poverty. That is their connection with work, within quotes. When we talk of women's patriarchal subjugation in India, it is very common to talk about the Ondor Mohol. মেয়েদের অন্দর মহলে আটকে রাখা হলো. For the Dalit woman, there is no Ondor Mohol. You don't have a house. Where will you have an Ondor Mohol? Where you hardly have one room. Where you have to go to the marketplace to sell your goods. Sit on the roadside to sell the ware. Where is that seclusion of the Dalit woman? She is not secluded. She is subject to exploitation, again at that level. But she also enjoys a measure of freedom from her household oppression. That is also a reality. So the picture is, I would say, very complex there. It is not a straight picture of oppression. Also, within the household, she has, in that sense, a greater negotiating capacity. It's for her to walk marriage or to beat up her husband. She will more readily find support for that from her friends outside the home. So, she does enjoy certain elements of strength that perhaps places her on a better footing because she is linked to production. She contributes directly to production. Women coming into the workforce, which we often hype, that this is great, around this period in history, women came into the workforce. That's not true. Women were there in the workforce. From ancient times, women were there. And all along, women from the low castes, the tribes, they have been very active in production. And that has been their point of strength also. That has led to their exposure in many cases, their victimization in many cases, but also it has been a point of strength.
I'm Sonali Ghosh. At first, I'd like to really tell you that
Please,
yes, I'm Sonali Ghosh. My heartfelt gratitude to you. Like, it is really a pleasure that we could really experience your enlightening speech. So my rather I call it an observation. When we're talking about Dalit writings or autobiographies, for example, can we really say that these writings, they are encouraging to forge some sort of an alternate space where their voices will recur, and that will in a way operate as this counter history or counter memory that Tony talks about. Yes. So in that case, ma'am, I just like to ask you one question. That is, when we are talking about, for example, the people who are non-Dalits, but they are entering to talk about their subjugation, their oppression. But having said that, the Dalit tribals, most of them have, to some extent, objected to it. That whatever we have experienced, you have not lived it, so you can't really shed that much true light on it. So, is it really? Is that the reason that they usually oppose this perspective? Traditionally, the dominant historiography that has always tried to mention that the indigenous culture has always been belittled and demeaned, always. So, is that the very reason that they have? That is actually justified. That they have some sort of a plot in their heart that you should not now, put up a facade and come to save us, for example. And yes, as America mentions that, my condition was, we read the minor recently, my condition was worse than an animal. I was into a book film, as he says. So in that case, can we really say that it comes from that point, like something in their hearts that they are not being able to, they're not being able to accommodate anybody who's coming outside the border of the way that it grew. They're not really welcoming because yes, this sort of oppression was perpetrated.
I would say, first of all, on this point, please sit up. On this point, as you said, there are different viewpoints. There are some Dalit activists who are very rigid and who would say that, well, a non-Dalit would not be allowed within our frame. There are others who would welcome non-Dalits. There are others who are even more open about it. So it varies. That's one thing. But at another point, lived experience, as I said, makes a lot of difference. And when it comes from the side of the non-Dalits, I would say, of course, non-Dalit voices are very important. They are very important, but also you've got to be careful about intentions. You can be more sure when you're looking at a Dalit. You might disagree with a political standpoint, but because of his lived experience, you can be more sure about his intents there on the Dalit issue. Just as in the case of a woman, you can be a little more sure that, well, on a woman's issue, she will probably be a little more sympathetic or understanding. Not always, maybe. But here, again, when it comes to a non-Dalit, looking at the Dalit issue, Dalits need to be a bit careful about it, observe over time, scrutinize the person, not only the writings, but I emphasize the person. The person. You can write a lot of things, and you can practice something diametrically opposite, because the milieu is different there. So here, there's a question of, I would say, caution. That is important one. Secondly, it can provide a support system, but the core has to come up from the Dalits themselves.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
You are requested to keep your questions previous.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you so much for your kind speech. I am Shuri Chatterjee from the Minister of Marketing. My question is that is in the Sunlight History of the Nation. What we have seen in order of Bureau strategic silence, so that they can be the Dalit women, if I may dare say, that they have nothing in society. In this hegemonical society, in this hegemony where they are already an outsider. So do they need to use the strategic silences, or do they need to go back in the space of memory and replace certain parts so that they can be accepted in the so-called much? Is this strategy adopted by them? Is it different from how?
No, it's not important that they be accepted by the Bhadra Samaj. their life realities are different. So whether the Bhadra Samaj accepts them or not, it doesn't matter. And what they need to do is they need to, build up their own strength, where the Bhadra Samaj at a point of time will have to recognize the reality that they exist and they have a culture to challenge the culture that the Bhadra Samaj had imposed on them.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. My name is Swata. You have obviously met me before. I would first like to thank you for your very eloquent presentation of the cause that you are standing for. আমি একটু থিওরি থেকে প্র্যাকটিসে কোয়েশ্চেন একটু নিয়ে আসতে চাই। আমরা সবাই জানি যে পরবর্তী দিনে একটা কাস্ট সেন্সাস হতে চলেছে আবার। সো রিসেন্টলি কয়েকদিন আগে কয়েকটা সপ্তাহ আগে হিন্দুতে একটা জিএন দেবীর একটা আর্টিকেল পড়ছিলাম। So he was talking about the precarity of the caste census that is about to happen. Where he was saying that the census, without any corrective implementation on the legal side of the society, is going to cause more harm than good. So that was a food for thought. I mean, and it really led me to the consequence to think that yes, it is actually more precarious given the current political situation of our country. It is more precarious if the affirmative action and the implementation does not transpire into reality. তো এইখানে আমি আপনার ওপিনিয়নটা চাইছি যে আপনার কি মনে হয় যে সেন্সাসটার দ্বারা কি পরিবর্তন আসতে পারে বা আরো আসবে কিনা?
About the caste census, I don't know. I mean, nothing is still very clear about it. One, exactly how it will be conducted, what questions would be asked, how, what would follow from the data that comes up, what decisions would be taken on the basis of it. All these are tricky questions which remain, I think. But in spite of that, I would say a caste census is desirable. If it's done with the best of intentions. That is the point, that's the second part which I said, if it's done with the best of intentions, it is, I think, desirable because it would at least throw up certain data about the position of different castes, and you can take decisions only when you have the data. You can take meaningful scientific decisions, but then again, the basic point is intentions. That remains, and if you're going to bungle with the data, that could be very, very, very dangerous. So it entirely depends which way the whole story goes. But a caste census, I believe, as I said, with the best of intentions, is necessary. Whoever sits at the helm and takes a decision on having a caste census. That is important, I think, because that sort of a census would let us understand where we stand.
We are running out of time, so let us stop now. Again, question? Okay. Now, I would like to request, to invite Dr. Bashata Ghosh, Assistant Professor, Co-Founder of the to address our second speaker today, his presentation. So to address her, to introduce her, I would like to request Dr. Bashata Ghosh to come.
very good morning to all the dignitaries present here, all my colleagues, presenters from different colleges and universities, and my dear students. We already, we are in a deep mode right now, if we can say, the kind of conversations and the kind of, deliverance we got from Professor Chatterjee. So now we would move into that journey forward. And I would like to request our plenary speaker, Dr. Orijita Shantra, to come on stage, please. So please put your hands together for Dr. Orijita Shantra. Dr. Orijita Shantra is a research scholar at the African Center for Evidence under Johannesburg, South Africa. Mostly been men often intellectualizes and thereby masks rather than explains the structure of caste system. It gives an overemphasis on the ideology of the caste system, namely on its ritual aspect to the exclusion of material conditions and questions of power. This is a consequence of focusing on the Brahminical view drawn from Brahminical texts. It completely evades the views of Dalit writers who have provided a counter view on the caste system by focusing on the experiential dimensions of caste-based oppression, I unquote. To the extent I intend to examine caste as also subject position, and I consider the various ways in which Dalit writers of the memoirs position themselves as a woman and a writer who enjoys a level of relative autonomy from the constrictions of her caste position. In other words, I proceed from the two basic but paradoxical points. I argue that in women's narratives, autobiographies or memoirs, the narrating self is both communal and the site on which a certain idea of community is fragmented and at times deconstructed. By this, I mean that Dalit narrators generally recognize their identity as Dalit in a caste-conscious political structure and as women in a male-dominated social position. This is to say that despite their own implied positions within the category, they are nonetheless able to take a critical distance and to subject them to critical scrutiny while writing themselves and others back into the spaces from which they have been systematically and indeed systemically excluded. For example, writing specifically on the precarious existence of the Mahar Dalits of Maharashtra, Urmila Pawar remarks on the intersection of caste and space in the preface of The Weave of My Life. She notes that, I quote, Dalit houses in the Konkan region were usually not located on the margins of the village but found at the center, probably as a matter of convenience for the upper caste, who could summon us at any time and wanted us at their beck and call. The community was haunted by a sense of perpetual insecurity, fearing that it could be attacked from all four sides in times of conflict. That is why there was always a tendency in our people to shrink within ourselves like a tortoise and proceed at a snail's pace. I unquote. However, Power traces the history of resistance to the caste system to Mahatma Jyotiba Phule's movement of 1873 and Ambedkar Satyagraha at Mahad in 1927, both of which sought to challenge the invisibility and untouchability of Dalits. She seeks to account for women's places and their structured absence within their respective histories by shifting both the terms and modes of address.
Regarding caste, in trying to make sense of her own past, Baby Kamble reveals in her autobiographical narrative a deep structure of a system that by and large reproduces itself in the fabric of daily life and no longer needs to justify itself. As Isabel Wickelson says of the foundation of caste, that is, the pillars of upholding a belief system, the piers beneath the surface of a caste hierarchy. She notes, and I quote, as these tenets took root in the firmament, it did not matter so much whether the assumptions were true as most were not. It mattered little that they were misinterpretations or distortions of convenience as long as people accepted them and gained a sense of order and means of justification for the cruelties to which they had grown accustomed, inequalities that they took to be the laws of nature. Moreover, besides the force of custom, the repetitive acts of supplication and distance to which the Dalits have grown accustomed, the narrator focalizer also reveals that the caste system reproduces itself in the existing hierarchies between caste and outcaste and within caste and outcaste. Campbell also refers to the trap that Hindu religion rituals in which generation after generation of Dalit wasted away in the senseless worship of stones, images of Hindu gods, in utter misery. Indeed, the narrator is at pains to show that it is Dalit women in particular who are the bearers of Hindu rituals, the false happiness. Nevertheless, the stigma of untouchability looms large and doubly marks Dalit women. Campbell recalls in the relation the occasions when during the ritual festivities of the month of Asar, I quote, the lady of the house would go to the village shop. Standing in the courtyard, keeping a distance from the shopkeeper, she would pull up her pallav over her face and then, using the most reverential and polite terms of address, should beg him with utmost humility to sell her the things she wanted. Apasab, could you please give me this despicable Mahar woman some shikakai for 1 paisa and half a shell of dry coconut with black skin? The shopkeeper's children would be trickling out into the courtyard for their morning ablutions. He would give the innocent children lessons in social behavior. Chabu, hey you, can't you see the dirty Mahar woman standing there? Now don't you touch her. Keep your distance. Immediately, our Mahar woman, gathering her rags around her tightly so as not to pollute the child, would say, take care, little master. Please keep a distance. Don't come too close. You might touch me and get polluted. The shopkeeper would come out and from a distance throw the things into her pallav, which had spread out in order to receive them. She would then respectfully keep her money on the threshold. That, of course, did not pollute him, I unquote. I have quoted this particular example of Dalit women's experiences at length for a number of reasons, not least of which is that it captures the social and political economy of caste and the specific nature of and character of Dalit women's embodiment of the humiliation of untouchability. Writing of untouchability as one aspect of Dalit experience, Gopal Guru remarks that, I quote, untouchability is a dynamic reality, is bound to produce experience which is always in excess of its description. Hence, the available description is often inadequate to capture the totality of the meaning of the experience. To capture the full experience of untouchability, one requires to invoke other perspectives and methods. I unquote. For his part, Guru proposes the philosophical and archaeological frameworks as two frameworks that could open to us much richer and nuanced meanings of the phenomenon of untouchability, as it were that could enable us to tap excess meaning embedded in untouchability as a dynamic practice. Taken together, the prison metaphor for characterizing Dalit life in general and Guru's philosophical and archaeological frameworks for reading the deep structure of one instance of this imprisonment, that is untouchability, help to give supplementary meaning to Dalit experience, which, as Guru puts it, is always in excess of its description. Indeed, the narrative itself is laden with imagery which, taken together, seeks to illuminate various states of bondage, physical, psychological, social, and religious, and modes of resistance. Thus, what Guru calls the need of Brahminhood to outsource untouchability to others, which, I quote, involves a philosophical move to supplement untouchability into others, can be extended to other experience. In phenomenology of untouchability, Sundar Sarukkai refers to untouchability as, I quote, sets of practices, I unquote, of the upper caste, which have had a direct impact on modern Indian society, and calls for, I quote, a philosophical reflection, I unquote, on the Indian philosophical foundations of untouchability. This is in part because natural and moral concepts are interrelated in Hinduism, and the, I quote, implication of the interrelatedness is the natural dart gets related to moral dart, or that those who are morally impure also embody the impurity in their. In this light, Shivani Kapoor notes the is governed by the segregation's logic of caste and untouchability constitute themselves by the very denial of pollution or ascribing of whatever origin in its own service is far more pernicious and long-lasting than one that is closed and static, I unquote. Within the Dalit community in which the young narrators grow up is a patriarchal and casteist order which works by manufacturing women's complicity through different forms of suppression, for instance, or through what Uma Chakraborty calls, I quote, the process and the mechanism by which women internalize certain values such as Sri Dharma or the appropriate codes of conduct for women, I unquote. As Chakraborty further notes, women, I quote, came to invest in them these appropriate codes of conduct, thus becoming complicit in reproducing the whole structure of inequality in which caste and gender were inextricably linked, I unquote. In this sense, the domestic patriarchal order governed as it is by appropriate codes of conduct for women mirrors the Hindu nationalist order, which is similarly governed by appropriate codes of conduct for which caste is created. However, my discussion of power and Campbell's autobiographical narratives take the form from the two locations in which the story is told. The first begins the narrative of a young girl growing up in the village, followed by the narrative of the mature woman who reflects on the coming into knowledge of her past, present, and future. This approach, I argue, helps reveal the ways in which the narrator conceived of the surreptitious operations of history, that is, of history's propensity for masking its ideology in the quotidian lives of its subjects. After all, Dalit literature is an attempt to unmask the naturalization and ritualization of certain historical relations by proposing other histories and other locations of historicizing. This is the persistent preoccupation of Dalit autobiographies that I have tried to discuss in this presentation, the deconstruction of the ways in which material historical relations are embedded in the Hindu religious system of rituals which govern non-religious life. In this sense, then, by presenting the young narrators in the process of historical emergence and self-formation, in reflecting on the writing of Karukku, Bama remarks that after 7 years of living in the convent on 8th November 1992, I left behind my life of renunciation and came out into the world. After that, I wrote my book Karukku. That book was written as a means of healing my inward wounds. I had no other motive. Yes, it had unexpected results. It influenced people in many different ways. Karukku made me realize how potent a book can be. My parents read it. They understood me a little more. My siblings read it. They could comprehend the pain I had experienced in my life. My friends read it. They praised it because it was a new kind of writing. People from many villages read it. Although they were hostile at first, they realized that it was necessary. They rejoiced and encouraged me. Many Dalits read it and said it gave them strength. Literary critics read it and analyzed it, asking each other how to categorize it. They decided finally that it was a new genre in Tamil literature. Many praised it, many scorned it. After all, the noise died down. Bama's assertiveness become evident both in terms of how she frames caste as the problem of the upper caste supplemented into Dalits, to use Sundar Sarukai's formulation, and in the way in which I quote, in spite of my being a Tamil woman, I was held in some respect because I did all the jobs at the convent that were allocated to me capably. I unquote. However, let me trace the critical import of Bama's representation of caste and gender as a way to anchor my central idea about the politics of looking back, and Dalit women's autobiography as what Judith Cowley calls it, the space in the space between frames. I quote, a new discursive practice that relocates and reinscribes invisible identities into history. What is evident in Karukku and other Dalit narratives that I have discussed, the omnipresence and lives of the narrators from the time they are aware of their social environments. I have already cited in the connection the narrators' relocations of our earliest experience of the manifestations of caste, but it bears repeating here. She recalls that, I quote, when I was studying in third class, I hadn't yet heard people speak openly of untouchability, but I had already seen, felt, experienced, and been humiliated by what it is, I unquote. Power lays the grounds for contesting a certain version of Indian. This is aided by what Sonalkar says about, I quote, the narrator's position, which is neither central nor distant but constantly engaged, I unquote. In this sense, I still have time, right? Yeah. In this sense, to caution a historical view towards the caste system as perpetual and eternal.
he further elaborates, if we do not adopt a historical view on the caste system, a sense of defeat sets in, which presents the caste system as invincible. By rejecting all other struggles, identities, and class struggles, such an outlook makes the caste system as an integral part of Indian life and people. It converts it into the organic characteristics, and thereby it is made as a touchstone for defining Indian psyche. I unquote. It is this historical materialistic approach to the caste system and its meaning that I seek to tease out in my discussion of the autobiographies. Indeed, the recurring historical sense in all these autobiographies that I discuss are more so discussed, and more so in the autobiographies by the Dalit women. It is this historical, Here, okay, I'd like to draw the conclusion of my presentation with Leigh Gilmore's understanding of the nature of the historicity of life narrative and its significance. For Gilmore, I quote, autobiography may also be a site of resistance, especially as it engages the politics of looking back and challenges the politics of how the past and the present may be known in relation to a particular version of history. Thank you. Should I stand? Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your deliberation. We do really need to talk about the margins. The question you started with, that why do we need to talk about margins? And I think what you said and what we perceived, these kind of discussions, they should not be restricted within seminar halls and academic arena. Rather, we should have such kind of discussions, at our para wars and various family gatherings where we find discrimination happening at a more practical level rather than what we see in literature. So I hope our students are quite enlightened by your lecture, and they must have learned a lot about different writers and the critics, and I hope they have questions. So without further delay, I would like to take a few questions. From the students or the presenters, if you have any question, please stand up and ask.
Mic. I don't think there is any question. Okay, you're done.
This is Shukrit Singh, teacher department. My question is, as we read in Mulrajan's Untouchable, and since you talked about the untouchability of the marginalization, so somehow we see the acceptance, like it's also from my personal experiences that they say like, আমরা তো নিচুরা, তো ওরা যেটা বলবা we have to accept it. So ma'am, is it like যে এই কারণটার জন্য the marginalized people are still behind?
This is a very relevant question, and I think throughout my presentation I tried to address that idea. And if I talk about my thesis, I have tried to address that complicity of Dalit minds, because the example I noted, from Kamle's book, where the woman is just standing outside the shop, and she is very much conscious about her own presence, and she is asking the little boy, addressing him, the master. And here I'd like to bring two theories. One is Kripke's term. He used a very relevant term called rigid designation, right? So when we are named, like achoots, panchamas, untouchables, we start carrying that identity on our body. And that thing is happening with the woman, Mahar woman, who is standing outside being conscious about the presence of a little boy and saying, hey, please, can you, little master, can you stay away? Otherwise, you are going to pollute yourself. And throughout these autobiographies, when the narrators are talking about
they looked at themselves and found having to contradict that statement. So from that perspective, like when I am the child endeavoring to write in a Dalit, I am endeavoring to write a piece which is going to address all of these issues. So from that perspective, like if I have that motto in mind, what sort of language do you think should actually suffice? I mean, if I'm talking about a vernacular language, or if I'm talking about, let's say, a very normal, common, cholti bhasha, যেটাকে আমরা বলি, আমরা মনে একদম নিজের পরিবারে or territory মধ্যে যেটাকে কথা বলি, if I'm using that language, it may not be, and people may not be able to comprehend. Some people who may have good intentions, and I want to reach out to them, but then that sort of like we need to oscillate a bit and we need to figure out how we can actually place ourselves, our voice, because I mean that is my question basically. What sort of language do you think should suffice? Because at the end we are trying to understand the experiences of the people who are like at the receiving end of it. It's extremely tormenting. So which language should they actually look up to or talk about?
Well, Shonali, it's really a good question, and in my thesis, I've tried to think about language, because whatever I've chosen from South Africa and India, the Indian Dalit literature, I've tried to take the translated works, right? But it's a question that that must be addressed, I think. And as ma'am was also telling us that when I tried to find the topics for my research, and when I went to South Africa, my supervisor was, okay, there are many languages there and you are Bengali, right? So can't you just take something? And these books are not generally translated into English, and I couldn't find a very good, not good, every Dalit literature is, they are trying to represent their experience, but I couldn't get something from Bengal and from Dalit literature from Bengal. So but I believe that when I am trying to talk about my experience, it's better to use your language, and I think people must understand through the language the writer is giving us. But yeah, I'll try to look into this topic and try to think about it. It's really a good question, and thank you so much for it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. I'm a faculty here in the Department of Political Science. My name is Surya Sharda. This is one of my general observations regarding this. I'll share with the entire house here. We know, I was in the moment you were delivering your lecture, and midway I entered the room. So what I could comprehend from Abhinav Sinha's
Theorization, yes.
Theorization, what you say. Is there are numerous UN conventions and all these things. So that this feeling of Dalit, that you are an untouchable, that can be contained to some extent. And well, but still it is going on. People are being looked down upon. Ladies and gents are being looked down upon on the grounds that they belong to the lower class, the Shudras. Better to say they are nevertheless Shudras. So it is the product of Varnashram. Now, what I feel is that it is rooted in the psyche. Now, thing is that how to uproot the psyche? A child has his first socialization in the family. In the family. Later, as a toddler, he goes to kindergarten, something different. Apart from every other component, the child gets familiar with the fact that আমরা কিন্তু ব্রাহ্মণ। So, how to approach that psyche? That psyche remains years within the boy, probably in a later level. Just as the evils of society, for that matter, rape, you hang some people, but how do you hang the psyche of the component that I am the powerful, I am the dominant? No government can kill the feeling. This very feeling of mankind is probably also takes the same road. Previously, people were assertive, but now they prefer to take dual path. So the day this psyche gets uprooted, we don't think we need to adhere to the UN protocols. But still, some development has taken place when we see that this, probably in the year 2024 August, this Ajikar girl, when that issue found place in the Delhi UN agenda, in the Dalit movement, probably some development has taken place. But I think there are years to come before we can uproot the psyche.
True. I think I'm going to take it as a good comment. It's really, thank you so much for this comment. Thank you, ma'am.
Do we have any other question? Okay, so it seems that our speaker has sufficed what she had to say, and it is now our job to reflect on that. And even if you come up with questions later on, we will share her email address so that you can always send her your queries to be answered. So we are already running a bit late, and I would now request our guests to come with us for their lunch, and the students and the presenters. You are also requested to collect your lunch from outside, just from the help desk. Our volunteers would guide you, and after that we would meet. It is 12:15. Sorry, 2:15 now. So we would meet at 2:45 for our technical sessions. So all the participants, you are requested to go to the help desk, and students, you are also requested to consult your friends who are volunteers for your lunch. We meet you post lunch for the technical sessions. Thank you.
বলা আছে স্টুডেন্টসদের, ওরা নিয়ে চলে যাবে। ও এইটা একটা বড় মানে গিফট গুলো আছে, এইটা কাকে যেন দেবো।